How you're going to fuel effectively for your longer runs is ultimately going to come down to 3 areas, and at the end there's going to be a bonus point on this, right? So point number 1 is going to actually come down to your calorie consumption. And I know that sounds really basic, but not enough focus gets placed on to someone's weekly nutrition, right? Your weekly nutrition ultimately wants to be dialed in, because the better your nutrition is across a whole week, naturally that's going to allow you to perform better when it comes to that longer run, whether that's on the weekend or within the week, right? The amount of calories you're going to be consuming is going to be incredibly important, and making sure you're actually aware of how many you are consuming or how little you're consuming, right? Because if we're actually not aware of where the calories are currently at, then naturally you'll underperform if our calories aren't actually fueling us effectively. Hitting a certain amount of calories, which is around maintenance, if not just slightly over, depending on what your overall activity level is like across the week. So the better we can hit our calories within the week, the better we're going to perform when it comes to the longer runs, because we're going to be fueled more effectively, allowing you, one, to perform far better, your results to shine through your actual training itself. And then when it comes to doing your actual events, then by the time you actually get to these events, naturally you're going to be in a far better spot in terms of overall fitness and pace, just because throughout your training blocks you've actually not just solely focused on the actual running and the strength work that needs to be done, but you've attached a nutritional strategy which has allowed you to, one, remain in great shape, and two, fuel effectively for your training blocks, which then has allowed you to perform really well in these sessions, which then has impacted the overall accumulation of your training, which has allowed you to become fitter and faster. So when it does come to your race days, your overall race time should have naturally improved without actually needing to push too heavy. But obviously when it comes to race day, you want to obviously give it everything you've got. But in terms of just coming back to where we're starting at, is for the longer runs, you'll all be sitting around a maintenance level across each day and across your whole week, because that's going to allow you to actually be fueled effectively for your runs. And again, you need to work out your calories from how active you are across the week. And if you want access to that, just tap the link below in the comments, and it has got a free calorie calculator in there that's going to allow you to understand how many calories you need to be consuming on a day-to-day basis. Which brings me into point 2, and that is macronutrients and the actual importance behind them. And point number 2, macronutrients. Macronutrients are made up of 3 main areas, technically 4, but we'll speak about 3 today. Proteins, carbs, and fats. Now, when it comes to running, when it comes to doing performance events, very much like half marathons, 10Ks, you need a certain percentage of split in order for the macronutrients to work really well for you. The absolute ideal split for your macros to be sitting in the right area so you can effectively perform through your longer runs throughout the week is having a 40-30-30 split, right? 40% carbohydrates, 30% protein, 30% fats. And the reason why you want 40% of your macros to be coming from carbohydrates, being the highest percentage, is because your carbohydrates that you'll be consuming on a day-to-day basis are going to be the main fueling source. When you go on longer runs and shorter runs, naturally carbohydrates will be the main source of fuel, which is then going to allow you to actually perform effectively when it comes to doing your run work. Now, naturally, when you look at carbohydrates, there are all different types and qualities of carbohydrates, right? And you want to be consuming, just from an overall personal standard standpoint, the best quality carbohydrates as possible, right? The quality does actually matter to what you are consuming, because that is, again, going to fuel you either effectively, short term and long term. So if you can get quality carbohydrates in, very much like rices, pastas, bagels, that sort of thing, you're going to put yourself in a far better spot across the week to be fueled effectively for these longer runs. But when it does come to the longer runs, you actually can utilize different carbohydrates to have a positive effect on your actual training performance. Naturally, when it comes to food, you will hear things around bad foods, good foods, right? Surprise, surprise. There are certain types of food that you could claim that are lower quality, right? But the reality is, sometimes that lower quality type of food can actually be really beneficial for what you need within that moment. So again, looking at certain moments, different types of quality of carbohydrate can actually be beneficial to you if they are actually on the lower end, right? Because they actually become a quick return on actual consumption, right? Quick releasing, very much like a small party bag of Haribo. Doesn't sound too clever, right? In terms of actual quality of carbohydrate. But when you're actually running, it's mostly going to be really, really beneficial to consume when you're on those longer runs because they're quick releasing, they're easy to consume, so therefore it's actually going to aid your glycogen stores and your carbohydrate intake whilst actually running. So when it comes to the actual carbohydrate intake within this, I'd be spending a good amount of time looking at what types of carbohydrates are going to be used best in certain moments across the week and within training blocks. And then that brings me into the actual training session itself on those long runs. The exact fueling strategy you're going to need in terms of carbohydrate consumption. Now, ultimately, what you're going to want to do is you want easy access to carbohydrates. So anywhere from around, I'd say 14 kilometers onwards, you actually want to start dipping into gels, because when you can use gels, you're going to get the benefit of the carbohydrate source from it, which is then going to aid your performance on that longer run. And just to round this video off, bonus point one. There's 2 bonus points, right? Bonus point 1 is anything over around 14 kilometers run. Something I'll actually be doing just from previous experience and previous feel is actually bumping your daily calories up around 200 to 300 extra, just because you're actually going to be utilizing them from a running standpoint and a recovery standpoint more than you actually think. So when it comes to clocking up that sort of distance and beyond, I'd actually be looking at what maintenance actually is set up for you through that current training phase and actually bump them up around 200 to 300 calories extra, just because I can guarantee that it'll have a far better effect on performance, recovery, and your body responding to what you're trying to do. Point number 2, and I'd honestly say this is most probably the most important one, right, is that it's not always going to work. It's not always going to go to plan. You can't win every battle, right? But what you can do is become really consistent with doing the steps what I've spoken about, right, within this video. And the better you actually become at that, and the better you become at being consistent with it, the better your performance will come over time. But it does take time to build. So ultimately, what you need to be doing is not worrying about the days that go wrong and the days that go right. Just focus on a whole, from a 30-day block, a 60-day block, a 90-day block of seeing gradual increase of performance, gradual consistency with nutrition, from calories, macros, using gels on runs, and using these bonus points. And you've got to remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. This stuff takes time. In order to perform the way you want, there's a lot of things at play that we can't actually control. But what you can control is majority of the stuff I've actually spoken about of how to fuel for your longer runs, right? Because if you get really consistent and you improve at the stands you do these things at, then there's only one way you can go, and that's upwards. The trajectory will be going upwards with your training performance and with your actual running results. So as always, any questions, please just drop them in the comments below and I'll get straight back to you. But if you haven't already, please press subscribe and like. I really appreciate it. Catch you in the next one.